everyone, and welcome back to The Examine Life Gen Z Engages Philosophy. I'm your host, Laura, and today's conversation is one I've really been looking forward to. We often talk about college as a time of intellectual growth, but what about spiritual growth as well? What role do universities play in forming the whole person and not just the mind? Today, I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Peter Kilpatrick, the president of the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. Dr. Kilpatrick, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here, Delara.
To start off, I'd love to hear about your own path and what initially drew you to serve in a Catholic higher education and specifically to the presidency.
Sure. So I've been uh, a professor and teacher for 42 years as a professor and 45 years as a graduate student, teacher, and then, facilitator of classes. So I have a long history of teaching and education. And I'm also a Catholic convert. So I converted and became Catholic when I was in graduate school. That's a whole nother story. So I found that I'm very deeply committed to higher education, to my Catholic faith, and to the Catholic intellectual tradition. Um, and why is that? Well, Catholics really birthed the university 800 or 900 years ago. The University of Salamanca, the University of Bologna, the University of Paris, the original universities were all outgrowths of what were called cathedral schools at the time. And I became very interested in the history of education and how the liberal arts education was originally formulated by Hugh of St. Victor and St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Albert the Great. So it was always an ambition of mine to try to put together education and my Catholic identity and my interest in Catholic history. So when I had the chance to move from my first university, which was North Carolina State University in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I was an engineering professor, to be the Dean of Engineering at the University of Notre Dame in South Bend, it was a very attractive opportunity for me to put those two parts of my life together. I was at Notre Dame for 10 and a half years. I left in 2018 to spend time in Chicago at the Illinois Institute of Technology. That was a personal decision because three of my four children lived in Chicago at the time. And then 4 years ago, I was actually planning on retiring. The Catholic University of America approached me about becoming their next president. And after a lot of reflection and prayer, I decided to take the job. And honestly, I look back on my life and it seems like everything I've done in my career prepared me for this role. They say God plans and or man plans and God laughs. So I don't think I've ever really had a long-term plan in my life. I think I've just sort of followed what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I like that saying. I was thinking definitely this position you're in now, like definitely God's plan for you, but I like what you said. I wanted to know how you would say being a university president differs for when your mission includes not only like academic excellence, but the spiritual formation of your students. Like, how does it differ from just being a president of like any other university?
Yeah, so I began to learn about this when I went to Notre Dame and began to hire faculty and staff there because an important part of Notre Dame's mission is to be a Catholic university, but they also are very deeply committed to academic excellence. So in my former role, North Carolina State University, we would hire for academic excellence, and of course, I think an important dimension of academic excellence are faculty who are virtuous, who are good people, who are kind, who are compassionate, who are humble. There are many faculty out there who you can't teach them anything because they know it all. And humility, I think, is a really important quality in academic excellence because faculty, like students, need to be lifelong learners. They can't get to a point in their career where they think they know it all or they no longer are academically excellent. So the virtues, humility, courage, fortitude, patience, temperance, compassion, these are really important qualities for faculty to have to be academically excellent. So what I discovered was the same qualities that you need to be excellent happen to be the same qualities that people of faith have,
Mhm.
um, because of what they believe in, um, and what they're taught by their religion. So to my happy discovery, it turns out you can pursue academic excellence and you can pursue spiritual formation and people who have religious faith in your hiring practices, in the programs that you generate, in the service work that you do as a university. So I really don't think there's any conflict between pursuing academic excellence in a university and pursuing spiritual formation. And I think the world is beginning to realize that. We're seeing a great resurgence of interest in the spiritual life in America, um, that we didn't see 10 years ago. And I think it's because this awareness is really beginning to take root, even in the academy. Um, which often leads cultural change in our country.
Yeah, I agree that I feel it goes hand in hand and like just even with becoming a more like fulfilled person and bettering yourself, like being devout to your religion while also pursuing your academic career, like I think that it helps people kind of stay intact with the person that they are.
Hmm.
That kind of leads to my next question because was going to ask, as kind of the spiritual landscape continues to shift among younger generations, how does see the Catholic University of America, how does that balance tradition with kind of the questions of today's students and the needs of them?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say the spiritual landscape, as you call it, is really shifting very much towards people being very hungry for peace in their life rather than turmoil. The word balance, mental health,
Mhm.
um, a lack of anxiety or depression or just mental unrest. There's a lot of evidence out there, including, from the program for human flourishing at Harvard, that one of the most important determinants of human flourishing, particularly mental health, is some sort of spiritual grounding. Having uh, belief in divine providence or God of some kind. One of the things I like to say, Delara, is that human beings have an innate need to believe in something. Um, and it turns out that everyone in America does believe in something. And in fact, for many years, there's been kind of a new religion in America that I would call progressive Gnosticism, where people believe that there's a need and a truism that the world just keeps getting better and better and better. And yet, we have a higher rate of depression and anxiety in America than we've ever had. So, how is that better? It's not better. And I think it's because people have lost sight that there is a God, and He's a personal God, and He pours grace into our hearts. And when we tap into that, we bring all those qualities of peace and serenity and balance and mental health into play in our lives. So, how do we balance it? I think um, caring for our students spiritually is a really important part of what we do. And we do that um, even with our students who are not Christian or who are not Catholic or even believers in divine providence. And we do that primarily through our counseling center, but also through our academic programs that seek to help them find that balance and that serenity in their life. Um, so it's a very important dimension, and I think if you asked any university president in America, how are you handling the mental unrest, the mental health issues that your students are facing? I think a lot of them would say something very similar to what I'm sharing.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think I do agree with how people are shifting more. I just like see it in the people and people my age and people my generation, like shifting more towards strengthening their relationships with God to help them kind of settle, like you said, like the turmoil. Um, and I think that it's a much better source than things that people often choose to turn to because there's more security there and there's kind of this feeling of peace when you are able to form a relationship with God and kind of fill that void in yourself rather than seeking other things. So I think a university that encourages that rather than not looks down upon it, but makes it difficult, I think is really important for students.
Yeah, there's a great quote from Saint Augustine. Our the new pope, Pope Leo, is Augustinian. And early in his pontificate, he quoted St. Augustine. It's a very famous saying. St. Augustine says, "Our hearts are restless, Lord, until they rest in you." And I think that's what every young person is looking for right now.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, with this podcast, like I hope to reach people from, who have questions and who don't really know where to start with their faith, but they know they want to build something, or maybe people who already are very secure in their faith and are interested in a university that encourages that. But my next question is, what advice would you give younger people or students, Catholic or not, but who are curious about like religion and spirituality, but unsure where to start? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, it's a good question, Delara. If people are searching and they don't quite know where to start, I guess maybe the first and most important thing I would encourage them to do is find a spiritual mentor. Someone who's, maybe a little grayer than they are, uh, who's had a lot of life experiences that have led them to a point in their life where they're peaceful.
Mhm.
Um, and you can kind of figure that out when you meet people, whether they're pretty well put together or not. Um, and then ask if that person would be willing to mentor them. So I'm very fortunate here at Catholic University that I've had a lot of students approach me and ask, would you be willing to spend some time with me? Would you be willing to mentor me? Um, and every professor who's been around students for a while loves that. They love to be able to share, whatever knowledge or wisdom that they have with young people because that's why we go into the profession is to try to be of help to young people. Now, sometimes it takes a little judgment to find, a good mentor. But that would probably be one of my first pieces of advice. Maybe the second piece of advice is I would find um, a, a good source of spiritual reading that gets you in, that helps you begin to understand how do I seek out, how do I seek out God? How do I do that? Um, and there's some tremendous books out there. I've recommended many to the students that I've mentored. Those would be my two suggestions. Find a good mentor and then work with the mentor to find some spiritual reading that helps you begin to seek out God on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think that people like going at the search alone, like while I think that initially is what drives you, I think having a mentor could be very impactful. And I do agree with the reading. I think for myself, like for anything that I've ever been interested in, as soon as I dive into some sort of reading or research or anything, like that's where I really find myself gaining the most out of it, the most interest, the most passion. My next question, and I think maybe we can wrap it up with this question, is is what's one hope that you hold for the future of young people, young students, or the future of Catholic education?
Yeah, we've kind of talked a little bit about it, Laura, but my biggest hope for, um, our current and future generations of students is that they discover for themselves the joy and the peace that comes from trusting in God. Some of the most peaceful, joyful, hope-filled people I've ever met are people who really have put their trust in God. Because, as human persons, we're all going to face uh, suffering and challenges in our life. We're going to, all of us, we're all going to face the death of our parents, of our loved ones. We're going to face tragedy of some kind. We're going to face illness in our life, some of it debilitating, some of it chronic. Just by virtue of being human beings, we are going to experience suffering. And how you deal with that suffering, I think, has a tremendous impact on the arc of your life, whether you're peaceful, whether you're trusting, or whether you're anxious and um, at wit's end. I mean, uh, we have a world's expert here at Catholic University named David Jobs, who's one of the experts on suicide. He's written many books on suicide. He's done tremendous research on how do you diagnose suicidal ideation? How do you deal with suicidal ideation? It's sort of an epidemic in our country right now. And David is just an incredible researcher. He's also, by the way, a convert to Catholicism, and he's a very peaceful and loving man. Um, and so my great hope for our next generation of students is that they discover this joy and peace that comes from trusting in God.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece to leave us out on because I think that'll really shape the next wave of people, the next generations. I think having a deeper trusting in God and turning to something more fulfilling in their lives rather than something detrimental. So, thank you so
Yeah.
much for speaking with me today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, Delara, it's great to spend time with you. And if I can ever be of any further help to you, feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much.
You
Have
bet.